I'm not here to mince words, okay? What I do is really messed up. But I'm not the villain here. Every Christmas or birthday, I see the same thing happen. People get dogs, they think that they're ready for their kids to train, and then it winds up being too much responsibility. Where the kid changes his mind at the last second, and now he wants a turtle instead. And suddenly, dog's a burden. When they bring the pups here to our shelter, the goal is to get them rehomed, but we don't live in a world caked with butterflies and rainbows. There's a harsh reality that most people don't think about. It's because we all tell ourselves we're good people. Over half the dogs we take in never get a good home. We try to keep them as long as we can, but honestly, supplies are limited, our budget even more so. Typically, a dog or a cat can stay with us for about 4 days, and then we have no other choice but to put them down. There's nothing worse than having to euthanize animals. I just wanted to go to a good home, but given the local population of strays is already overwhelming, a lot of neighborhoods we don't really have a choice. I'm not a bad person for trying my damnedest to give these animals a second chance, and this is why I often encourage people to spay or neuter as soon as possible. Anything we can do to curb the population is better than this active euthanizing. Feels like we're hunting and killing these innocent creatures. And if you think that what we're doing is harmless, then my recent nightmare could make you see things differently. I came into my shift after Christmas, just like always. Fresh box of pups at our door with a hastily scribbled message on the side of the cardboard, free to good home. Of course, this was expected. Many people assumed that we would just post the dogs on Facebook or Instagram and get them rehomed before the day was done. And sometimes they view us as a charity, not bothering to even give us a return address. Part of that is likely due to the shame of just dumping dogs at our doorstep. Either way, these 4 pups looked healthy and robust. Larger than normal huskies, if I had to guess. I'm not an expert on these things. It looked like they had brought in a whole family because 2 of the dogs were larger than the others. Called out to my coworker to help get them inside to the crates. These animals also looked scared and frightened, confused about what was happening. And because of this and their sheer size, I kept my distance as best as I could until we can get them into a holding area. Now, I can't tell you how many times I've been injured simply because of putting my hand in the wrong spot. And these dogs definitely look like they could put a hole in my hand. Stanley, one of the other few sad saps that agreed to work after Christmas, helped me as best as he could as the dogs yelped and snapped at us. God, these mutts are heavy. How in the world could they have just gotten them? He asked as he finally got inside, and I grabbed one of the ropes to lead the larger male into a cage. I haven't the slightest idea, but man, these dogs are full. Like they just ate a full-grown person, I said, as I lugged the large male into his pen. The others were placed in a separate pen each, and it seemed like the large female was the most aggressive, likely a protective instinct for her pups. Thankfully, none of them lashed out against me or Stan. Once we had them separated, I took a breather and got a better look at the larger huskies. And they looked more like wolves, to be honest. The hair on the back of the female was standing to bristle. She was not too happy being separated from her pups. Let's get them some food and water, I suggested. Once we were away from the dogs, my phone buzzed. My supervisor, Brent. Brent had been getting on to us lately about the census and keeping our kennel at low population. Big surprise, right after Christmas, he was singing the same song and dance. Listen, Lance, I like you. I know you love these animals, otherwise you wouldn't be in this line of work. But I just got the New Year's budget, and they've cut us down about 30% from last year. That means we aren't going to be able to play nice anymore, he told me as I followed Stan to the pantry. Are you kidding me? You can't be serious. We need to educate our community about this crisis. Killing more animals isn't the solution, I argued. You think I don't know that? This is all a numbers game, and honestly, we have bigger problems to deal with than the shelter. The only way we're going to keep this place afloat is by doing what needs to be done. Besides, you know as well as I do, these animals wouldn't survive on the street anyway. This is a mercy, Brent told me. I reluctantly agreed, and I hung up. Getting a big bowl for the dogs and heading back to the kennel. It made me hate myself to even admit that I knew he was right. We simply didn't have the supplies available to be able to make a difference. It was a sobering thought as I slid the bowl of dog food towards the pups. But despite how they seemed hungry, both were now resting in the corner, or at least pretending to. For some reason, as I offered them water, it felt like their eyes were on me. Something about these dogs unnerved me. I sat back and I decided the next step was registering them into the system. Otherwise, it would do no good to even keep them there. And as I did, Stan rushed in with his phone against his ear, looking a little panicked. "One of the kids fell off the trampoline I just bought them for Christmas. I have to go," he announced. I wished him well, told him a few fleeting words as I got back to work. A few hours passed and I got some other paperwork done. The dogs continued to rest and watch me. Occasionally, the larger ones would get up and test the strength of the kennel gate, snarling angrily as I offered them food again. It was clear by now they were starving, yet they still refused to eat. Something was off. And then, just as I was about to head to the restroom to take a leak, something extraordinary happened. The large female was pacing, panting, and banging her body against the cage, circling the tiny kennel over and over. Then it began to spasm uncontrollably, shaking and hitting the pen as it began to howl loudly. Every hair on the back of my neck stood up as the male joined her in howl. The female kept convulsing, collapsing onto the floor of the shelter, even as it began to spit up some white and yellow mucus. Before long, I saw her hair begin to shed off at an alarming rate, and the howls were replaced with a sharp breaking of bone. The hound's bodies were beginning to change. Its hind legs were straightening, and its robust chest sounded like it was cracking and shifting into a small size. Next, its snout and face drastically transformed. The long, haunched look of the wolf now resembled that of a starved older woman. A human being with wild and scared eyes stared up at me. "Holy shit!" I shrieked as I stumbled backwards and realized the woman was almost completely naked. What the hell had I just witnessed? I kept my distance from the cage as I looked towards the others, watching as they began to transform as well. First, the male wolf shook and spat out strange mucus from his nostrils and mouth, his teeth cracking and his jaw breaking as it reformed into a familiar human face. The two younger pups were the same. Their transformation seemed a little less violent, but in less than 5 minutes, I had seen all 4 of them metamorphosizing into actual human beings. It was uncanny. And yet, they still seemed to have animalistic habits, snarling like the wolves they had just been, keeping their distance from me. Immediately, I offered my jacket to the woman, let her cover herself as the boys hunched in the corner. She was wrapping her arms around her body, insisting the focus be on her boys. "If you have a hot meal or warm tea, anything that is high in protein," she explained. I was still taken aback by all of this, and I had a 1,000 questions, but I complied with her wishes and warmed up some toaster strudels for them. As I gave the children their food, I watched both of them in stunned fascination as they lapped it up like animals. They're having a hard time reverting to normal human tendencies, I realized. How long have you been?" I said, stuttering as the animalistic behavior bothered me. "Shapeshifters? Werewolves? Or just monsters in general?" the man said as he leaned against the bars. "We don't remember. Each time we change, we lose a little more memory of our lives as humans. Eventually, we stop changing back altogether," he muttered. He looked like he wanted to snap me in two, simply for looking at his wife for even a fraction of a second. You can't control the change?" I asked. "If we could, do you think we would spend our lives pissing on trees and eating skunk?" the man snapped. "He simply means to help," the wife offered. Her children were becoming upset at the raised voices of their father. My attention focused on them. "Here, let me get you some clothes. We have a donation center in the back of the building. These kids shouldn't be eating off the floor and naked." Surprisingly, the man seemed offended by this offer. "You think that offering us some simple trousers and cleaning us up makes us like you? Yeah, we'll never be human again. Clothes you offer will simply be ripped to shreds the next time we change, and it's doubtful we'll even remember the experience. This is our life now," he said. The wife nodded solemnly. Then I watched as the family began to howl in unison. It was an eerie, ominous feeling. But I wasn't simply going to brush aside accepting their curse as being fate. I told them that I would go make a few phone calls after the family refused to leave the cages. If we got out and hurt people, I'm not so sure I could forgive myself for hurting others, especially if we can't control it. Innocent blood shouldn't be shed, the wife explained. To be honest, I didn't really know who to call or how to explain it. So even after making a few calls to nearby science institutions and such, I realized I was still at square one. I guess I shouldn't have expected anyone to believe this. I mean, who would? So I lied. I called my boss. I told him I had a bunch of very unique dogs I needed help with, to hold them down so that I couldn't euthanize them. I mean, it was an awful lie, but I hoped that if everyone else saw this family, it would make a difference. And I couldn't exactly just sit around and wait for them to change again. My shift would end soon, and I didn't want the next person coming in to just do the deed without being aware of what these people are. There's no telling when they might change. My boss said that he would get there as quick as he could, especially since Stan had unexpectedly left. But it wasn't fast enough. The family began to revert back to their dog forms about a half an hour after I made the call. No, you can't do this! You have to show them that this is real! I whipped up my phone and tried to videotape the transformation, but the father lashed out from the cage and swiped it from my hand, cracking my screen. I wasn't sure if he intentionally prevented me, or if it was the beastly instinct taking over. And once they were transformed, though, it seemed that the werewolves were far more vicious than before. Did it make them hungry, going through the shape-shifting process? Kevin showed up about 10 minutes later. "These the mutts?" he asked. He was clearly half drunk, probably from a Christmas party, and I doubted that he would listen to my explanation, but I had to try. "There's been a misunderstanding. These aren't normal dogs," I started to explain as he got the supplies ready. "Damn right they ain't. Look how big they are. What have they been feeding these things?" Kevin asked. No, okay, you don't understand. These are like actual mythical werewolves, boss, I started. Of course, he looked at me like I was crazy as he approached the first cage. "You're shitting me, right?" he whispered as he rattled the door. The large female reared its back and her hair bristled again. She wasn't about to go down without a fight. "Grab the rope," Kevin ordered. I considered my options. If I complied, I knew it was likely this entire family would wind up dead at my hand, even though I knew they likely didn't want to kill innocent people in their werewolf form. Surely it wasn't okay to murder them. I felt lost in a dilemma that I never anticipated, but my reaction was almost instantaneous. "No, I can't. These animals can't be harmed," I said as I pulled him away from the cage. Kevin gave me a disgusted and disappointed look. "The hell have you been smoking? Do your damn job! Can't have large, vicious dogs in here when we open it up for adoptions next week." I tried to reason with him, but he had already opened the door to the mother's pen. I grabbed his arm again as he prepped the syringe. In the same instant, the female leapt forward and bit at his ankle. The male rushed towards him as well, pushing the metal grating down. "Holy shit!" he screamed. As he dropped the needle, he managed to pierce the father, and the dog yelped, hunching back as the medicine took ahead. I acted quickly and opened the other cages where the two young pups were waiting. I stood there paralyzed in fear that they might attack me too as the wolves surrounded Kevin and nipped at his skin, covering him with scratches as they barked, and then they went towards the dying father. They seemed to ignore me entirely, or perhaps they respected me for rescuing them. They were watching as the medicine made the large male werewolf fall asleep. His mouth foaming, his body convulsing. It looked like utter pain, endless agony. I'd never seen it happen like this before, but it reminded me of when people said they saw prisoners get lethal injections. "Yeah, get the damn rope, Lance, before they get out!" Kevin screamed. Instead, I opened the door and I let the dogs run free from the shelter. The mother werewolf gave me a look that I understood to mean thank you, and she and her boys ran off. Meanwhile, my boss nursed his wounds and gave me an ugly look. The male was slowly turning back into human. He looked at it in abject confusion and horror, still not comprehending what he was seeing, or perhaps refusing to accept it. Instead, he focused on me. "You're done here, do you hear me?" I didn't really care. I couldn't even imagine the horror of letting them die. And it occurred to me that I felt the same about all the other animals in the shelter, too. This cruel cycle had to stop. I wasn't sure how he was going to explain the dead body at the shelter, but I wasn't going to be part of this anymore. Later that Sunday evening, I wrote up this account. I pondered over everything I had discovered. It was terrifying. To have my entire world shattered. In fact, I was honestly reconsidering if the whole situation had even happened. Was I simply projecting my own anger towards the way that our society was tossing aside animals? The answer came later that night. A slam against my door. I peered through the keyhole and saw Kevin standing there with hardly any clothes on. He looked distraught, confused. His eyes are bloodshot wild. "You have to help me. You were right about those animals." He looked like he had attacked something, and maybe even another person. Was he regretful over his treatment of the wolves? "What happened to that body?" I asked. He didn't know I was testing his response, but his answer sickened me. "I had to dispose of it. I managed to hunt down and get rid of those others as well. We can't afford to have bad press, not now. It has to be stopped somehow, right? So please, help me," he pleaded as I saw him beginning to transform again. I felt my body go numb as he told me that the others had been harmed. My efforts to rescue them were snuffed out. It made my entire soul feel hollow. Sure, I'll help you," I said, as I got a chain, and I led him by the neck into my house. I locked him in the bathroom as the transformation started to finish, and blocked the door as best as I could. Then I made a phone call. "Hello, Animal Control? I have a wild dog that got loose in my neighborhood. I managed to lock it into my bathroom so it doesn't harm anyone else. I think it's already hurt one person." "Yeah. Yeah, well, in my opinion, I think it needs to be put down." Hey there kids, it's me, MrCreepyPasta, and it's the end of today's video, or today's episode of the podcast, which means I want to tell you guys thank you so much for watching. And thank you for hitting like and subscribe and bell, and I think it's still subscribe on podcasts. One day I'll look that up. If you guys are listening on your phone, like I think the statistics say like 90% of you are, then on your phone you can also listen on another place. It's an app called Chilling. The Chilling app allows you to listen to stories from me that you can't get here, as well as stories from a whole group of other narrators. A lot of them you've heard before, some of them you've even heard here, like Autumn Ivy. Plus, it allows you to control the background music and background ambiance, which I think is probably one of the coolest features on there. Check out Chilling on Android and iOS now. I want to give a very big thank you to everybody on Patreon, especially Jordan Alexander Sanchez, Stephanie Butler, Brian Arce, Bobby Karman, Tristain Pelton, Chance Burnett, Diana Kraus, Crazy Kid, Mr. Marcus Blitz, Ika Limchok, Dirt Diver 030, Robert Schonkwiller, USMC, Matt Bach, Jables Raz, Masked Note, Joshua Mullen, Dan Pham, Matthew McNeese, Ben Spates, Jeremy H., Raltizal, Fikamal, Nana, The Morgan, Nick Weaver, MeltedLake, Tali Sue, Sky Mara Ravenswood, William King, Reaper 61167, Darth Miver, Micah Ortiz, Satanic Aries, aisodoehtraed, Nessie, Ronnie Hansen, Parafa Panda, Bardohawk 764, Lambda M98, Harley, Billy Morrow, Sashi Suzaku, at Grizzly Olsen Pro, My Body Sounds Like Rice Krispies, Jay, Miss Exandra, Suji Campbell, Stricken, Azarine Fox, Fried Chicken 12, Freddy Krueger, Happy Birthday Jason Willis, Infernal One, Lisa Cottrell, Caspian, Hades Nephew, Tater Chip, Acid System, Prozac and Pancake Appreciation Society, Cryptic Nightmares, Kiri the Sloth, Tommy Green, Fester's Lampshade, Sky Harbor, Nico Kyle, Rafael Rodriguez, The Ginger Bros, Aaron Stormcrow, Daniel Polson, Trey Smiles, and Corey Kenshin. Like I said, I cannot thank you guys enough for being a part of this, and that goes to everybody down there in the description, and everybody who even can just support for $1. Thank you guys, thank you guys, thank you guys. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday season, and sweet dreams.